Hey guys, welcome to part 5 in the Advanced Workflows course. I hope you're a fan of Justin Timberlake because it is time to get in sync. Dad joke or bad joke, I don't know which. Anyway, in part 5, let's look at combining audio and video from different sources because it's a regular occurrence for productions to record using multiple cameras or record external audio that's not embedded in the main camera's video. So, here's a few different ways to get things to line up. First, we'll take a minute to look at timecode. There's a lot that we could discuss here, but I'm just going to give you the highlights if you're unfamiliar. So, even if you have no idea what timecode is, I'm sure that you've seen the numbers floating around in the Premiere Pro screen while you're banging out edits. Timecode is like the glue that keeps all of your edits together, and in video, it's broken down into hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. Frame counts change based on the frame rate of the media or the sequence settings. 2398 footage has 24 frames to 1 second. 2997 footage has 30 frames to 1 second, and so on. A sweet trick with timecode is that you can use these numbers to sync audio and video together in a single click. Premiere or any other NLE will simply line up everything based on the time in those clips. Hey, look, it's one of those clappy things you see on movie sets. Yes, the clapboard is very exciting, and it gives us a visual and audio moment in time to sync across video and audio. You can get similar results that a clapboard gives you by someone simply clapping. Like this. But what do you do if you're working with footage that doesn't have a clapboard or there's nobody that claps on camera? Well, you can still find a sync point by looking for distinct actions and sounds in the media that you're working with. This can literally be anything so long as you can identify it across all of the camera angles and all of the audio that you're working with. Some things might include a car crash, it could be somebody hitting something with a piece of wood, it could be a baseball bat. These sync points can literally be anything that you can visually see and hear at the same time. Okay, who likes magic tricks? So when you find yourself swimming in hundreds or even thousands of clips that need to be synced and their timecode is all over the place, there are 2 things you need to do. First, you need to go and yell at the DIT or the DP for not using JamSync timecode because they are making your life a lot more difficult. Then after that, do something that's a little more productive and you should sync everything using waveforms. Now, obviously, this only works if all of the media has sound attached to it. And in most cases, not always, but in most cases when recording external audio, cameras will also record a scratch track of audio to the internal video files they're creating. Now, if there's no audio or video on clips that you're trying to sync, you're going to have to do everything by hand, and it's no fun, but just suck it up and get it done. Okay, with that out of the way, let's look at a few different tools that we can use in Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve, and a third-party plugin that can help us sync these video files together. Premiere Pro has a few different things built in to help sync media using waveforms. You can select a group of clips in the project window and choose Merge Clip, which will make a new single clip based on those sources. Another option is in a sequence, you can align a group of clips together by getting them roughly in the right place. Then select them and click Synchronize. Premiere will do some math and some fun things, and then they'll all line up perfectly. The last thing that you can do is sync batches of clips together using the Multicam workflow, which we're going to look at in just a little bit. So here we are. Let's talk about syncing footage together. Now, up to this point, we've discussed a few different ways to sync footage using timecode, using sync points, and using waveforms. And we're about to talk about and show you how to do all of those right now. First thing I want to look into is timecode. Now, in this interview footage, you can look and tell that we're using dirty footage. It's watermarked. Right here, we've got burned in timecode and we have burned in file name. So this obviously won't be used in a final video, but it is common to receive assets like this, especially working on high-end things like commercials and films. It can also be used when you're working with a graphics-intensive piece like visual effects and things like that. So the first thing I want to look at is the timecode. Now, if you look at this, the timecode clearly matches these clips. If I park this clip on top of each other and then go and turn on my overlays, this shows me the timecode of my video layer 2 and video layer 1, as well as the audio layers. And as I scrub through this, you can see that those timecodes match up. Now, this is a very special case because we're working in like a classroom setting, but if this was the real world, it would be very rare for these clips to actually end and begin at the exact same time. Anyways, so what does that do for us? Well, the first thing that I want to talk about is merging clips. Now, I don't necessarily use this all that often, but it is an important tool to know that's available to you. So over here, let's say that we just had a single camera and a single audio source. So we have our A camera, and we have the audio from the interview. Now with both of those selected, I can right click and say merge clips. And up here we can just say interview merged, since this is a demonstration. And for the synchronize points, we can choose the in points, which we don't have any marked, so it would default to the very beginning of the clip. The out point, which is the same case, it would default to the end of the clip since there isn't an out point marked. Or we could go by timecode, or we could go by audio. In this case, I'm going to choose timecode because I know that the timecode from the video and the audio match. So when I do that and hit OK, it's going to make one merged clip. And if we double click that, we can look in the monitor and see we now have 4 tracks of audio. The original camera audio as well as our external audio right here. Pretty cool. So it's one clip even though it's accessing multiple files. Again, I don't use this that often, but it's nice to know that you can do it. So let's get rid of that. The next thing that I want to look at is synchronizing clips. So this is a more useful approach. So let's say that we have multiple camera angles, or we have B-roll from multiple cameras being shot on set, and we want to sync all of those moments up together. So what you can do is inside Premiere with your clips in a timeline, we can drag these things so that they are roughly in the same location. They just need to be close, okay? And I'll even drag this audio over there too. So you can see everything we know is going to line up, but Premiere doesn't know that yet. So let's grab all of these, we'll select them, right click and say synchronize. When we do that, again, we're given the same options of clip start, clip end, timecode, and audio. This time, let's choose audio and see what happens. So it's going to have to process, it's going to have to think, it's going to look at those waveforms and see, okay, where does all of this stuff line up? And we're going to give it a minute and it is going to pull everything together right about now. And look at how nice and pretty that is. Everything lines up right as it should. Pretty cool. Okay, let's undo all of that. Great. Now, the last thing that I want to show you on how to sync up these clips is using sync points, and this is a manual process, so get ready. The way to do this is we need to select our clips. So let's pull in our camera A. And what we want to do is find some sort of movement, some sort of motion that we know we can identify across cameras. So I'm going to scrub through here until I see him do something. I know he moves his hands a lot, so let's see if we can find him touch his face or something like that. Like that, right there. Okay. So he comes up and I'm going to frame through this until I see him touch his nose. See, his nose moves right on that frame, and I'm going to mark an endpoint. Now I'll do the same thing with the B cam. So come here, let's zoom in just a bit. There we go. So we're going to back it up right when the nose moves. There. Mark the in and do the same thing with the C cam. Need to zoom in. This one's going to be difficult. So it looks like the camera operator cut between takes and this part of our interview has been cut together. So what we can do is we can see him talking. What I did really like about it was I like that it's over. So his mouth is open, he's done talking, and right when his teeth disappear. Okay, so let's go back to our B cam. We just marked, oh, excuse me, I need to mark an endpoint, and then I'll come here and do the same thing. So he's talking. All right, so right when his teeth disappear, right there. Mark the in, back to our A cam. And right again when those teeth disappear. Okay, now we have 3 points marked. What good does that do us? Well, let's take a look. So now we could come back into our timeline. Let's get rid of all these clips. And I'm just going to drag them in here. And we can again select, synchronize, and we'll just do by the clip start. Boom. They are all lined up right where they need to be. Now you can see our video layer 3. So our CCam has something strange going on with it. All right, sometimes this happens. If that's the case, you just need to zoom in and we can tell that all of these numbers line up. So I know that I am 2 minutes and 2 seconds off. So if I say plus 20200, it'll move there and I can back it up so that we are all in sync. Pretty cool. Oh, looks like I'm a few frames off there. So we need to move forward another 13 frames. There we go. Now everybody's happy. So I'm sorry that was a little back and forth there, but that's a good real world example of what happens. You go through clips, you find a moment that you think can sync, and if you get through all of your footage and all of a sudden you realize one of the clips maybe cuts sooner than the rest of the clips or something like that, you have to work backwards until you can fix the problem. Always try to figure out a way how to solve the problem. Okay, so let's hop back out of this and go check out DaVinci Resolve. This course is clearly built around Premiere Pro, but DaVinci Resolve is quickly becoming one of my go-to pieces of software. And here's one of the reasons why. Its auto-sync feature is outstanding. It's fast and can work with a large amount of clips at once. And if you're planning to edit in Premiere, you can still sync in DaVinci Resolve and move your sync clips over to Premiere using conform files like XMLs or AAFs. Now, what's really cool is DaVinci Resolve is completely free. Blackmagic Design gives you this awesome program with very few limitations for free, or you can pay $300 and get the studio version that comes with lifetime updates. How amazing is that? It's ridiculous. Anyways, let's do some syncing. The one thing about DaVinci Resolve is when you first open it up, it can be a little bit daunting. There's a lot of tabs, there's a lot of options, and it can be super confusing and overwhelming to somebody who's never stepped foot inside this program. I'm going to show you a very, very, very high-level overview of how to sync clips in Resolve. Once you start digging into this program and understanding how it works, it's not at all that different from Premiere Pro. Anyways, let's go and first import some media. So we'll go to our media RAID, go to projects, so on and so forth, and our interview and the dirty version. We'll grab these and just drag them into our media pool. Grab our audio. Okay. Now, when you're syncing audio in here, let's say you have a lot of clips that you want to sync. I've found that it's best that you don't try to sync multiple groups of clips. Like if you have something spanning all day, don't try to do that. You want to group clips in similar times. So if you have one scene of footage, sync that one scene. Don't sync 3 scenes together. I hope that makes sense. So in this case, we have one scene, and I'm going to select all of these clips. I'm going to right click and say create new multicam clip using selected clips. And in here, I'm going to type a new name. So we'll do interview multi sync. Great. From there, I'm going to make sure that my frame rate's 23976, which the clips are, and the angles sync in. This is what's important. So we want to take this and make it sound. Select sound. This will use the waveforms. For angle name, this is what the clips are actually going to be called. And so I'm going to call them clip name. So that'll be easy enough. Next thing we want to check is move clips to original clips bin. This is simply going to take the footage that's over here and move it into a separate bin, letting us know that it's been used already. So we'll say create, and it's going to analyze, look at those waveforms, and then sync everything together for us. All right, with that out of the way, you can see that our interview clips have been added to this original clips bin, and we have a multicam sequence. So how do we look at this? Well, you can right click this thing and say open in timeline. And if we look at this timeline, we can see that our clips have been synced up. Okay, so now with everything in sync, we need to figure out how to get all of this information over to Premiere Pro. They're 2 different programs after all. So how do we do that? Well, there's some cool things called translation files that we can use to conform this sequence into a sequence that Premiere Pro or Avid or that any other NLE can read. Now, it does have its quirks, but in general, this process works, especially with simple timelines like this. So to get that, we want to right click on our timeline, go to timelines and say export AAF, XML, EDL. Again, this is called a conform file, and we'll talk more about them later on in the course. Right now, it's important to just know how to make them. So Premiere is going to ask you where you want to save this file. And the first thing we want to do, though, is change the file type. Now, for what we're doing, an FCP7 XML is the type of XML we want to create. AAF files also work, but in general, this is a simpler format that moves things around with less complication, in my experience. So I'm going to make this an XML file. I'm cool with the file name. Say save, and we'll do that. Now let's jump over to Premiere. All right, so let's import that file that we just made. And it's important to remember that this file doesn't actually have any media in it. It's just information that tells Premiere Pro how to interpret that sequence that we made in DaVinci Resolve into a Premiere Pro sequence. So let's select that XML file and say open. And now it's automatically going to bring in the files that we have on our media RAID. And it does that because we're working on the same system. Now, let's say you were working in a networked environment, or maybe you were working on multiple computers. There's a good chance that these files would be offline. So if that's the case, you would open up this and you would see red. Everything's in sync. That's great, but there's no media attached to it. The way that we fix that is we can grab all of these offline files, right-click them, and say link media. From that point, we can navigate to where that media is stored. So we're going to match up that first clip, Cam A, and it's going to automatically resync everything else based on their file locations. It remembers where they go. And we're good to go. So now that sequence that we synced inside of DaVinci Resolve is inside of Premiere Pro. Rounding out our waveform magic tricks is Pluralize, and it's a more robust solution that you can use inside of Adobe Premiere. It's a paid extension that's been around for forever. Pluralize will sync large batches of clips with a single clip, and it can be a little slow to process, but generally it provides really good results once you learn how to work with it. So the only real downside is it is paid on top of your Adobe subscription, but if it helps you and saves you a bunch of time, it's probably worth it. Hey look, we're back in Premiere, this time using Pluralize, a third-party plugin from Red Giant that will sync all of your footage together. Now, in this example, we're using a very small amount of footage. It would not be worth the cost of the plugin to buy this. But if you're working on a project that has multiple interviews, or you're working with a ton of clips, hundreds of clips that might need to be synced together from different cameras, then Pluralize is a lifesaver. Now, I'm about to show you a couple of tips and tricks on how to use it, but in general, this is going to be a very broad overview of how to use that plugin. So, in order to use Pluralize, what you need to do is drag all the clips that you intend on syncing into one sequence. The next thing you want to do is separate clips by the cameras that they were shot on. So in this case, we have 3 cameras. By separate, I mean I want to move the cameras and their audio up and down on the audio and video tracks. The reason I do this is so that when Pluralize combines everything, these audio tracks don't overlap each other, which is a little quirk that Pluralize has. Okay, so I've got these separated out. Now I can go up to Window, Extensions, Pluralize, and Synchronize. It automatically detects the sequence that we have open. It sends all this media into the Pluralize program, and a few seconds later, we have a perfectly in sync sequence. Now, do realize that the longer your sequence, the longer that takes. The more clips you use, the longer that takes. So just something to keep in mind. But at the end of the day, even if it takes an hour for Pluralize to sync something, it would have taken you days to do it. Okay, let's talk multicams. Multicam editing is a useful tool when cutting together interviews shot on multiple cameras, or really any other type of footage that was shot from multiple angles and can be synced together. The basic setup for multicams is very easy. First, set an endpoint on each piece of media that the multicam is going to use. The endpoint should be the same point in time across all of these clips. Then select the clips for the multicam, then right-click and say Create Multi-Camera Source Sequence. And you can pretty much run with the default settings and it's going to work just fine. Click OK, and you now have a multicam clip. Bada bing, bada bang, bada boom. Now, if we dig a little bit deeper into the multicam window, we can find some powerful options that can greatly speed up our workflow. Specifically, we can sync by timecode, we can sync by audio or waveforms, and we can utilize track assignments. Track assignments work when syncing by timecode, and it will place video clips from the same camera or the same angle onto the same video track inside of a Premiere Pro sequence. For example, if you have multiple clips from an A, B, and C camera using track assignments, it will put all the A cam clips onto track 1, all the B cam clips onto track 2, and all the C cam clips onto track 3. But for this to work, we first have to log the clips from the various camera angles and label them. Let's take a look at what I mean. Okay, looking at multicams, the first thing that I want to do is check out the basic multicam setup like we discussed. So to do that, I'm going to grab these 3 clips from our interview as well as the external audio, right click and go to Create Multi-Camera Source Sequence. I do that and we'll go ahead and name this Emilio Interview Multi. I do want it to sync with sound timecode, so make sure that radio button's checked. The sequence preset looks good, and otherwise I think we're good to go. So I'll say okay. A few seconds later, we have a multi-camera clip in our project monitor, or in our project panel. And if I scrub through our source monitor, you can tell that this looks pretty in sync. But what if we want to take a closer look at that? What if we want to know for sure that everything's synced up the way it was supposed to? To do that, we can right-click the multicam clip and go to Open in Timeline. And that's going to open that clip in a timeline. I know, it's crazy. Anyways, so if we look at this, you can look at these waveforms and tell that this clip is definitely in sync. Now, we also don't need this extra audio on the bottom. That's the embedded audio from the video. Since we're using an external audio source, there's no need for it. And you'll even see that Premiere recognized that and turned off these tracks already by muting them. I'm going to go one step further, select them, and get rid of them. Okay, now we can jump over into a normal sequence, drag this guy in, and you can see how it looks. And again, let's get rid of these extra tracks. Don't need them. And so we come along. If I want to change clips, all I have to do is select, hit the number 2 on my keyboard, will go to the B cam, number 3 goes to the C cam, and number 1 goes to the A cam. Those are built-in presets that Adobe has for multicams. It's pretty intuitive. Hopefully you'll use them. Now, let's say that you want to go a step further and use one of these clips from the source monitor. Well, to do that, we can simply uncheck these things because we don't need the audio tracks 2 through 4. And I'll just mark an in and out so it's not everywhere. And whatever clip is selected in our source monitor, that's going to be the camera that comes up from the multicam. So let's overwrite, and that comes in. And you'll see that we have that camera. Again, if we want to change it, we can change it using the numbers on our keyboard. Okay, so that's the basics of putting a multi-camera sequence together. What about something that's a little bit more advanced? So I've taken the same interview and broken up the clips into multiple clips. So the beginning of camera A starts at the same time it did in the original clip, but then I put a big gap and then let it pick up maybe a few minutes later. For example, if we go to the end of this first clip, it stops at around the 5-minute mark. The second clip then picks up around the 7 to 8-minute mark. So you see there's going to be a gap in time there. Now, the reason I did this is to give you an example of what might happen if you were working with a long interview that had multiple takes with multiple cameras. So say camera A had 3 clips for a single interview, and camera B had 2 clips for a single interview, and camera C had 6 clips for a single interview. All of them the same interview, but with different amounts of clips over a general given amount of time. So the way Premiere is going to treat that is it's going to try to lay them out on the same track if we give it enough information. And the way that we do that is by logging that information. So if you remember back earlier in the course, we logged our clips using the camera angle. So let's bring this over here so we can look at it a little bit better. And under the camera angle, I made sure that my A cams had the A camera label, B camera label, and the C cam has the C camera label. Now, what we need to do is select all of these as well as our external audio source. Right-click, go to Create Multi-Camera Source Sequence. And again, we're going to call this Emilio Interview Multi. Okay, this time we're going to select Timecode though, and check the tick box that says Create Single Multicam Source Sequence. And for the track assignments, we're going to use the camera angle assignment. Note that you can use the camera label if you want to, but we're using camera angle. Okay. And as for audio, we can come down here and we want to make sure that our sequence settings use, we're going to stick with camera 1, sequence preset looks good, and otherwise I think we're in business. So say okay. And again, it thinks for a second, makes a multicam clip, and let's open this up and see what it looks like. So again, right click, go to Open in Timeline, and see how this worked. So you can tell that our audio, everything is still in sync. Look at our audio. Our audio, our waveforms all match the way that they're supposed to. And even our video, we can tell because of the way this clip is made that everything ends and begins the way it's supposed to. But our cameras are all on the appropriate track. So the A cam is on the track 1, B cam is on track 2, and C cam is on track 3. It just has these gaps in the middle of it. So again, that was just an exercise to show you how to do that. We wouldn't actually use this because clearly we're missing too much of this interview. Now, something else that I want to show you while we're in the multicam timeline, this is a good time to make sure that your time code is set correctly. Now, in our case, it is. We still are at the 3317 mark right here. But if we wanted to change that, we could click this and go to start time and change the start time to whatever we wanted to, even if we wanted to zero it out and say that. Now that multicam clip starts at 0. I don't want it there, so I'm going to undo that. I just wanted to show you that you could do that. You could also come in here and adjust the sync for these clips. Let's say that some of this was off by a second. You can slide this clip around. It manipulates the inside of that multicam clip, and it will be affected in any sequence that you put it in. Now let's hop back real quick, and I want to talk about manual multicams. Now sometimes a multicam clip isn't the best option. In that case, we can look at the manual multicam. It's not as sexy as a multicam clip, but in some cases, it's a lot easier to work with. The manual method basically unwraps a multicam clip and places all of the media inside of a source sequence. That might sound confusing, but it's going to make a lot more sense when I show it to you. So on the manual multicam setup, we've actually looked at this earlier in this section. Now, what I'm going to do is just drag all of these clips into our timeline. And we know that all of these line up, so I'm just going to be real simple about it and do this and drag it over. This is essentially a manual multicam. So we can start editing like this. I can chop up as he talks. I can turn off cameras that I don't want and move them in the sequence to create my edit. So here I want the C cam, it comes on, he talks, I'm done. I move it over here, turn that off, turn the B cam on, and keep going. So in some cases, it's easier to work this way, and in other cases, it's easier to do the full multicam setup. To determine what works better with you and your workflow just takes time and practice and just constantly doing it. And personally, I use them in both ways. It just depends on the edit that I'm working with. All right, and I think that wraps up everything with multicams and syncing. Next, we're going to look at our Scramble King project and talk about the various ways to organize and pull selects.